All right, cognitive biases. This is going to be a little bit less scientific than the last one because I'm not a scientist, I'm a product manager. I've been building products for the last 20 years, and I hope you enjoy what I have to say about them. So who here is familiar with cognitive biases and has visited this page on Wikipedia? It's basically a master list of every single bias that has been found on the internet. It's very hard to read. I've gone back to it over and over again over the years, and it's often sort of a situation where I have in my mind, I go out and go find, like, what was halo effect again? And I go in and find it, and I send a link to someone to help win an argument or something. And that's sort of how I do it. But then over the years, you start coming back to it again and again. It's this maze, but eventually finding really good nuggets all over the place. You learn about confirmation bias. So obviously, I'm coming back to this page. I'm looking for the thing that I want to find. I don't really question whether or not it's real science or not, but it works, and I use it. And then I become, the more and more I learn about biases, the more blind I become to the fact that I'm probably still biased myself. And so this is a really interesting loop that happens with people where you start to learn about something, and then you start to think you are past the point of being ignorant about it, and biases is one of the best cases of where that happens. And really, when you think back, like there are hundreds and hundreds of these things on this page out there. They're all different. They all have quirks. They all have different levels of academic backing for them. It's very hard to really get a cohesive sense of what they all mean. So I spent some time last year trying to get a better, how would I really understand this better? And I spent some time clustering them. So instead of 200 biases, there are now 20 clusters, and I started bringing them into sections or clusters like noticing when something has changed. Like there's this contrast effect or anchoring where you start to only notice things that change, or being blind to your own flaws, like overconfidence, or things like that where you're more likely to see information that does not indicate that you're wrong about something than the ones that sort of confirm that you are correct. So again, went from 200 to 20, which is sort of helpful, but still a lot of information. I did end up writing a Medium post about it, and I thought, like, hey, this is a cheat sheet. I've made this so much easier for people to understand, but it's still a 12-minute read. It's still like a lot of words, and just this graphic over here shows that like I haven't really simplified anything. And I like this quote, this Feynman technique, which is basically like you don't really understand something until you can explain it to a 6-year-old. And I didn't feel like I could explain biases to a 6-year-old, and so I didn't think I was done. So I spent another round of effort trying to understand like what is really behind all this. Why do biases exist, and why is it so hard to de-bias ourselves? It seems like once you learn about it, you should be able to turn something in your brain and stop doing that thing. But that's what makes them so interesting, is that you can't just turn them off. So what I sort of arrived at after thinking about it a little bit more was that there's really these qualities that the universe has, right? There's like, just on one hand, you've got just way too much information. No matter how much information we learn how to process, we will never be able to process all of it. So there's always going to be some kind of strategy that the brain needs to take in order to filter out a lot of that information. And oops, can I go back? Oh, yeah. So filters, we have a bunch of filters. It's like, get all the noise out, and it happens at a subconscious level, so you don't even really have a choice to think about it before filtering it out. So that's why noticing when something changed means that you don't notice all the things that haven't changed, and you can't make a choice about looking at that stuff very easily. Secondly, now you've got these little dots of information that are pouring in from the world, but that's not enough. It's not going to tell you a whole story. So you have to create the story around it, which links it up to your narrative of your own self, and it sort of helps it make sense to you in a way that engages a lot of other biases. Like, oh yeah, this is confirming the story that I already had about this thing, or I'm going to finish this because I already started it in the past. And these are the reasons that the brain comes up with these things, is to help tie it together in your head. The third thing that the universe has that we can't really ever overcome is that we don't have enough time or enough resources to think through every single possibility. Even trying to decide what to have for lunch, if we actually did consider every option, it would take us an entire lifetime to even consider that. So we have these shortcut methods like, hey, you're only going to think about this for a split second, and you're going to come to a decision. And we're always going to err on the side of a few things. And those are the biases. And the way that we err on the side of whatever's closest, that must be the right answer. Or like whatever is simpler is the right answer. Or whatever is started, I should continue doing that. And finally, the fourth thing that the universe has is we can't remember everything, right? So we can't ever go back and think about all the information that we've seen and make the perfectly rational choice based on that. So we have to pick and choose which things we remember. Things like the Google effect, where if you know that you can find it on Google, you're just not going to remember it because you can just go back to Google. And a lot of other ways to sort of store, like the one good example, the one takeaway from something that represents the set, even though the set has a lot more variety. You just discard the rest. So that's how I would explain it to a 6-year-old. I do have a 6-year-old, and he sort of gets it. So I think I have succeeded there. But ultimately, it's about simplifying all this. Like, what can you fit this information on a phone lock screen so that it's just it's no longer this 9,000-word document that I have to have in my head. I now have 4 conundrums that the universe has, and 19 strategies the brain has come up with evolutionarily, sometimes socially also, to combat them. And so that has helped me a bit. Of course, whenever I describe this to someone, this is sort of the next question, which is like, all right, that's great, but what should I do with this? Like, why should I care? And so to sort of help answer that question, let me back up a little bit, tell you about myself. I am 40 years old. I was born 40 years ago, and you can sort of see at the very top here, it's sort of washed out, but this entire box here represents 100 years of life. And at the very bottom is my 100th birthday, where I plan to ride a bike around the block as my victory lap. The black dot right here you see is the average life expectancy. So the green at the top is what I've already spent, sort of time I can't get back. The white is what's ahead of me before I'm possibly going to die. And the gray is extra time, bonus time if I'm healthy and lucky in life. So it really starts to constrain what I think I can spend my time investing in. It's really that third conundrum, which is I don't have enough time to do everything. And yet, we all are working a lot, right? So why do we work? Why do we spend our lives working? And I asked, this is the kind of question that you ask to your friends on Facebook just to get them to be upset at you because they'll have very strong opinions about why they work. But we'll get to that. I spent a lot of time at Amazon. Actually, I'll have a very similar screenshot that I saw from a few talks ago about the recommendations page. I worked on that a long time ago. 43 Things was my first startup, where it was about using the technology of recommendations and applying it to goals and blogging, and when the internet was still new. Health Month and Habit Labs. I just saw another screenshot from the Foursquare badges, where we were the first people to use badges with Health Month in the third party. It was correct. Definitely did not work. We got a lot of Indonesian users that wanted a lot of badges using Health Month, though. So that was something. 750 Words is another site that just promotes private journaling in order to sort of tap into the intrinsic motivation of wanting to express yourself, but wanting to do it in an uncensored way. And it's one of the only products that continues living with very little feature development, because it's sort of spinning this loop of self-expression and understanding yourself better, which is a nice activity to have. And then I was like, all right, let's go back. Let's move to San Francisco. I'm going to work at Twitter. I worked on analytics to help small businesses start to understand what's working for them. Sort of got the tweet impressions into the app so that you can see how many times people are looking at your tweets, how many people are clicking on links, that kind of thing. And now I'm at Slack working on the platform team, building APIs and app stores for people to build that kind of stuff. So I've done a lot of work. Half my life has been spent working. Why do I do it? What's the point? So this is the Maslow hierarchy that's been mentioned a few times already. If you ask people why people work, oftentimes, to be purely honest, we do it for existence, to buy food, to buy shelter, to buy our human basic needs. This is a highly motivating thing. It's the foundation for sort of our path to greater fulfillment. We also, of course, do it for money, not just for survival, but for vacations and for good food and for going to the movies and traveling and just having fun, and to have a safety net so that when we can eventually take some time off and work on our book or whatever it is. Once we have a little bit of that, then we start thinking about work as a venue to sort of connect with others, work on a team. It's really fun to work with a group on something and have a tribe that works and goes through trials and goes through victories together, and that's a very fulfilling reason to work. Again, oftentimes when people retire, they continue working simply to have that contact with humans. And as you go up the ladder, you want the impact, not just to work for whatever, for money, but you want to actually change people's lives. You want to put a dent in the universe, and you want to sort of have a little bit of credit for doing that kind of thing. And then finally, this is a self-actualization step. Like ideally, you would be just working for the pure joy of helping people and for growing yourself and for making the world move and improve. So that's the basics. You've seen this before, but I want to add an extra layer to this, which is like we are investing time and energy and attention into work. And most of that goes to ourselves, but we are also all working on products, working on businesses, working with teams, and we want that same sort of levels of hierarchy to be seen in that sector. So oftentimes, even if our own hierarchy is at the related level or for the belonging level, we want to then move over here and start working on the team that then is bonded and can survive and have an impact itself. And then finally, you don't just have a business for no reason at all. You actually want to change people's lives. You want to impact users and customers in the world. And this top right corner is really like, you're impacting people's lives. That makes your business succeed. That makes you feel fulfilled and grow. And it's like this map of increasing levels of influence and work and reward. And we only have this much bucket, this much life energy to really invest in all of this effort. So it's very important for us to be very strategic and mindful about how we invest that in the most efficient ways. So one point that I hope you can take away from this is that there's different sort of ways to leverage your time and your energy by building different kinds of tools. So there's this one kind of tool I'll just call the blank notebook, which is as long as you have this blank notebook, you can write your notes down, you can sort of add your thoughts. If someone takes your notebook away from you, you can no longer do that. The tool is required to do this work. And many of us think about products that when you have this device, you can do this thing. If the device goes away, you no longer have this thing. A type 2 tool, in this case, would be a book that tells you how to make other books, right? So it teaches you the skill of building products, or the skill of speaking Spanish, or the skill of building a house, or the skill of being healthy. And this is something that you take the book away after you read it, and you still have that skill. And so it's got a little bit more of an impact. And some businesses that focus on this are oftentimes the behavior change ones, where you use it for a while, you stop smoking, you stop using the program, and you now have this new sort of state. And this is slightly more effective than just the tool that only works while you have it. And then the third one is where it gets weird. This is the manual for how to write compelling manuals, right? So in the manual, it helps you think better, it helps you learn faster, and then this can be applied to all of the different products that you build, all the different relationships that you're in, all the different books that you're creating, all the products that you're building, and this one has enormous amounts of leverage because it can be applied across everything. It's a great use of time to build that. So to sort of bring that back into more concrete terms, I want to talk through these 5 stages of bias mastery, because I think biases, particularly in this case, can be all 3 of those tools, and which one, the way that you use it will determine the sort of reward you get from your level of understanding about how they work. So to jump in, there's this first level I call bias blindness stage 1, which means you don't even know about biases. You assume everyone is a rational, self-sufficient, self-interested human. You just do things because they're there, because they make sense. And if you were to build a team or a product around this kind of mindset, you would just be very rational about how you made choices. You would put for example, a big people button at the top of Twitter. And I'm going to use examples from my own experience so that I will take responsibility for some of these mistakes, but also they're not necessarily all bad. They work for what they do. So everyone gets this. I follow 2,000 people on Twitter. I don't need to follow more people, but someone at some point said, following people on Twitter will make people come back more often, and so let's just put it there for everyone. Slack has this link when you're first there to invite more people. We think teams are more successful when there's more people using Slack, so we put a big button there until you have enough people there. And then Amazon is notorious for this. This is sort of the classic strategy of if you want someone to buy something, put that thing right in front of them, and they will do it. And it does work. I bought a bunch of these for that reason, because they're awesome also. But just put it in front of them. But then you learn about biases, and you're like, oh wait, there's other things motivating people about their behavior, and you start thinking, like, oh wow, this is great because I now have a new magical tool to influence other people, and this is where the dollar signs sort of go off in your eyeball. They're like, great, this is going to be like, it's going to make everything easier. And I always am amused at this sort of level of bias blindness because it's definitely projecting it out to everyone else, but not seeing it in yourself. So again, you don't really take that into consideration for yourself, but you do things like the Amazon recommendations page, where like I created an algorithm where I know exactly what they're going to buy on the impulse. I was personally responsible for putting a page between the add to cart button and the shopping cart because we knew that, hey, another page full of products, another page full of products will get them to buy more things. And we will put the exact right products there that are the impulse type of product. And the same with moments. Like rather than saying this huge stream of information that's coming by all the time, especially when you follow 2,000 people, it's easier to package it up into stories. Like these are the stories that actually happened, and we can help sort of reduce the amount of overload on information and make it easier. And then finally, Slack also is sort of experimenting with this a little bit. There's an all unreads tab that sort of shows you the unread messages in the channels that you're most likely to care about. So this is, we know that people don't have enough time. We know that people can't remember what they're doing. We know that people are processing too much. These are the technical things that you can do to give them a bit more success as a result. So that's blindness. And then the day dawns on you where you realize, hey, wait a second, everyone else is biased. I must be as well. And what does that mean for how I build products, how I hire people at my team, how I think about my own roadmap and what I build? So this is a situation where like you want to build products where you create feedback loops for people so that they can learn faster. You might want to do this in the product itself, like Twitter Analytics, where hey, we don't know how to make your business successful, but if we give you the information to make your own decisions and come to your own conclusions, you'll learn faster and you're on your way. Pulling that back to your own team, you want to think about a data-driven culture where you run A/B tests and you do OKRs and you do customer research and user research. And maybe you pull it even back to your hiring processes where like, am I hiring the right people? Is the top of the funnel, that I'm considering all these resumes, am I filtering out the right people or the wrong people? A very easy optimization at most companies is just to change the way that you filter through the resumes and the applications of people that are applying to work for you, because they're the people that will build the tools that will make the impacts that you want. You want to choose the right people. And then pulling all the way back, you want to think about ways that you yourself can be less biased and less sort of easily jump to conclusions that are incorrect. And that means like going to allied skills workshops or implicit bias training, giving and receiving feedback more efficiently. So it's becoming less and less about the quick trick that you can do in the shopping cart and more about like, okay, well, how can I change the way that I think about building products? And I think that's when it has a lot more leverage. And then stage 2, this is the one that is scary because suddenly you realize, hey, wait a second, I can't solve this problem. Like I will never be able to fully consider every resume that comes in. I will never be able to fully consider every idea that we have. I will never be able to fully understand every single A/B test I run. I will never be able to test all the variations or consider all the edge cases, and everything starts to feel futile. And I don't know if anyone else has felt this way before, but like it's a wall, right? It's a place where you start to think, wait a second, maybe this problem is too hard for me to solve. I'm going to go back to stage 1 bias blindness and just work on engagement loops or funnels or conversions or that kind of thing. It's a lot easier, and you realize that itself is a bias, right? There is a bias to substitute hard problems for easy ones because that makes you feel better. But it does, right? And I do see a lot of hesitation to think about biases for this reason, because it's this endless path of like, okay, well, I can't get out of this. What do I do? Should I go back to where I was, or should I go forward? Here's another example of a situation where biases came back to bite us. One of the very, very first cognitive biases that was discovered was by Kahneman and Tversky back in '74, and it was this realization that scientific studies themselves were biased. They were prone to favor small sample studies because in a small sample study, you're more likely to see significant results. And seeing significant results is a highly motivated end result for a scientist, because then you can go to the publisher and say like, hey, here's something awesome to talk about. And you get your career gets a boost, the publication gets a boost, you get money, you get more grants. It's the cycle where you start to feel like, okay, well, I'm just gonna do this because it works. And even though you know that you're more likely to get the wrong statistically significant results with a small study, you still do it. And it's been from 74 to 2017, 43 years or so. And just now we're starting to go back and think, oh wait, all these scientific studies that have been done, how many of them are actually correct? And when we go back and check, a good chunk of them are incorrect. Some say 40%, some say 60%, but like there's a bunch in there that oftentimes the ones that we resonated with the most, the ones that we really thought like, oh yeah, smiling, that definitely makes you happier, suddenly can't be replicated in a study. So we have to go back and be realistic about that kind of stuff. And it hurts to sort of doubt not only yourself, but your business and your customers and your reputation and all that stuff. So yeah. This is bias disillusionment that I was talking about. Going back to the beginning, I'll go forward to what I think is a good path forward, and I hope this is a good takeaway for you all. How do you handle this, never quite certain, never quite feeling like you can avoid this stuff? I think it's about building a culture, and like actually the scientific method itself has tried to do this. This was invented hundreds of years ago. Just create hypotheses, test, and always be open to new evidence that might change your mind, and never be 100% certain. It's never a perfectly satisfying mindset to be in, especially if you want certainty and you want to just decide something and move on. But this is really the best way out of this disillusionment. One of my favorite expressions of this is this carving on the front of the Royal Society in London, nullius in verba, which just means take no one's word for it. Go back to the first principles, go back to like the raw data, and try to build up from there what you think, and always be open to being proven wrong, and actually seek out to be proven wrong as early as possible, because then you can be right more quickly. How do you apply this to a company? Well, this means things like Open Diversity Project, where you're sort of publishing your diversity numbers internally, and you're making yourself vulnerable to the public to say like, are we being fair in our hiring practices? Please, let's have a conversation about it. Or you can publish your raw scientific results or your raw experiment results and your hypotheses going in, so that you're not going to just choose. You're not going to run the experiment 20 times until one time you get into the 5% chance of being wrong, but it actually says what you want it to say, and publish that. So being very upfront and honest about what you're starting with and your assumptions, and then inviting people in to disconfirm you. So takeaways. I think in the mindset of building this kind of culture, you still need to think about yourself and your own basic needs. So never really, extend yourself further than you feel safe and healthy to do so. But building on that foundation, a practice of self-reflection, not only in yourself, but in your team and in your products. Always consider thinking about what your biases are, what your assumptions are, how can you question them some more. Then being open to new information, inviting people in to say actually, what else have I missed? If you're ever finding yourself considering two options alone, to do something or not to do something, it often means that there's probably more options that you haven't even considered. You should open it up to a broader range. Number 4, invite dissent. This is the hardest one, or not the hardest one, the second hardest one, but inviting dissent. So what if you were to go out and say here are all my assumptions, here are the weakest links in my logic, the parts of my product that I think are the closest to being incorrect or harmful, and saying, help me improve these in an open way. I think it feels very vulnerable, but it's also a great way to get better faster and to learn how to learn faster. And finally, each of us sort of are on our own path to understanding and mastering these biases, but one of the last steps is, after you feel like you've internalized a lot of this, how do you bring this kind of culture to your team? How do you bring this to the culture of your hiring practices? How do you bring this to your culture of your family and your other teams? And also, eventually, to your customers, because ultimately they're going to need this as well. And any products or companies that can help promote this culture of critical seeing, critical thinking, publishing your biases, being accepting of dissent, then everyone can sort of get to the point of feeling safe and mastering these biases the quickest. So last three things. Recognize that biases are part of who we are and the universe that we live in. Like, they're just not going away. They're part of the structure of the universe. We can't solve them. Look for these levels, like type 3 type of tools, the ones that help you learn faster. They'll make the actual skill and learning mastery of tools and topics faster, and they'll also make you a better product builder. And then finally, think hard about the time that you have and where you invest it, because we don't have a whole lot of time. None of us do. And so one of the biases is obviously future discounting, thinking about the future as less valuable than, thinking of the future as more valuable than present. But think about the time now that you have to change these cultures in your own teams, in your own communities, and this will help you, I think, get past the stage 2 bias awareness into the bias acceptance stage the most. And I'll leave you with this, which is that Feynman did not actually say that quote that I had earlier about the 6-year-old. We love to misattribute quotes to Feynman. We love to misattribute quotes to Einstein because of the halo effect. The halo effect is the effect where we think that smart people, anything that they say, will not only seem more true, but will grant this authority to the speaker himself, in this case me, but I'm coming clean. He did not say that. I made it up. And nullius in verba, come to your own conclusions. Doubt these things when you can. And thank you very much.